Hello and welcome to The Breakdown with Benjamin Nguyen for the week of June 28th, 2021. This show is going to be a little different. In addition to the weeklies, we're going to do an in-depth look at one of last week's stories, in addition to the breakdown subject of the week. Right now, let's get to the weekly. Shortly after my last report, Elizabeth Bailey was arrested on accessory charges for the attack on the Shasta County resident known as Bob, as well as an accessory to her involvement on the assault on Nathaniel Pinkney. On Tuesday's Board of Supervisor meeting, Kathy Steinbrück gave a recount of her assault from the previous week. Kathy, whom is a recall proponent for the three supervisors, was critical of those same supervisors, Mary Rickard, Joe Commenti, and Leonard Modi, for not reaching out to her to see if she was okay. As a reminder, Kathy's attacker Brad Hart was arrested within 2 hours of the incident. Kathy proceeded to lay blame for the attack on the supervisors for emboldening the LGBTQ+ community with the Pride Month proclamation they voted on June 8th.
And he's spitting in my face saying, F you, F you, F you. These are the people that you gave an entire month to. You devoted all of June to honoring them. And that is what has come. You would think they would be happy. You would think they would be thrilled.
During that same meeting during public comment, Nathaniel Pinkney asked District 4 Supervisor Patrick Jones a question regarding how Carlos Zapata turned in his guns, which was required by court order due to his temporary restraining order Nathan has against him. What follows is an extraordinary exchange.
I would like to ask you, when Carlos Zapata turned in his legally registered firearm to Jones Fort, did he bring it to Jones Fort or did you drive out to his ranchette and pick that up?
I will answer you, but I really don't like. I consider you a domestic terrorist. You've taken part.
That's what I consider you, sir. That's what I consider you.
Gentlemen.
There is no evidence to support Patrick Jones' statement. Shortly after news broke that Carlos Zapata is facing battery and disturbing the peace charges, his sister-in-law Mary Beth Martinez shared an LA Times article along with a comment about her displeasure with her sister's husband. She states that her sister Rebecca Zapata is no longer someone she recognizes. The footage that was withheld from Nathan was finally released to his lawyer, which was then made available publicly. The footage was taken from security cameras at the Market Street Blade and Barrel on May 4th. This shot shows Carlos Zapata entering the establishment. However, he seats himself out of frame. Carlos allegedly throws a glass at Nathan, which happens off camera. After being told to leave the establishment, he and his wife leave. Footage taken in the back of the restaurant shows Christopher Meyer walking around back prior to Nathan's assault. Later in this same location shows 3 individuals approach Nathan and one of his associates. They were positively identified as Elizabeth Bailey, Christopher Meyer, and Carlos Zapata. As Nathan re-enters the building, Elizabeth attempts to pull Nathan back by his shirt, and then Christopher strikes Nathan with a closed fist, to which a co-worker returns a strike of his own. As they retreat, Christopher picks up a CO2 container as if he was going to assault someone with it. Another employee approaches, and they both leave. While Carlos did not physically assault Nathan in this part of the altercation, he clearly approached along with Elizabeth and Chris, as shown in the footage. Carlos made a statement that the footage would show him pulling Chris and Elizabeth away from Nathan. The footage does not appear to show this, and it is unclear why Carlos would approach the back of the Market Street Blade and Barrel on foot with Nathan's 2 assailants, to then state he was Nathan's protector. This footage is in direct conflict with previous statements that Carlos has made regarding the incident. He originally asserted that he didn't know the other 2 people that assaulted him. However, in addition to walking up with them, Elizabeth Bailey is one of his employees at the Palomino Room. The footage release also directly refutes a police statement released to the public on May 17th. Key elements were not correct, such as Nathan following Carlos to a second location, which did not occur. Sergeant Rob Granero wrote this press release, which the LA Times had initially confirmed inconsistencies with Police Captain Piletsky. The LA Times article was published on May 19th. As of this moment, the police press release has not been retracted, nor has a statement been released since the footage has been made available to the public. Carlos's arraignment is currently set for July 12th. He is being charged with battery and disturbing the peace. Red, White, and Blueprint released a statement on their Facebook page about their version of events. They made a public call to action for, quote, all patriots of Shasta County to peacefully stand with Carlos at his arraignment on July 12th at 8:30 a.m. at the Shasta County Courthouse. Woody Clenenden, Cottonwood militia leader, also made a statement of his own on Sunday, requesting that people show up to a protest at the Shasta County Courthouse at 5 p.m. on Wednesday, July 7th to protest, specifically calling out District Attorney Stephanie Bridget for what he called intimidation of recall supporters. And now, the breakdown. This week's breakdown, I'm going to speak on somewhat of a controversial subject. The subject for this week is terrorism, treason, and sedition. In the United States Constitution, the act of treason is defined in Article 3, Section 3, as an act of betraying one's own country by means of levying war or in giving aid or comfort to your enemies. Sedition has a somewhat complicated history. It is defined as the conduct or speech inciting people to rebel against the authority of a state. In U.S. history, the Sedition Act of 1798 was passed by the Fifth Congress and then signed by President John Adams. It expired in 1801 and wasn't taken up again until 1918, where it was largely an extension of the Espionage Act. It ultimately was repealed in 1920, but its mention in U.S. history is important. Largely the reason the Sedition Act was never a permanent fixture in American politics is because of the First Amendment. People had concerns over who would decide what was seditious behavior. That being said, I do feel it is pertinent to discuss, as we are seeing rising levels of this kind of rhetoric around the country, and specifically here in Shasta County. Terrorism is defined in the Code of Federal Regulations as the unlawful use of force or violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, the civilian population, or any segment thereof. The reason I bring this up is that in Shasta County we've been seeing increasing numbers of these type of behaviors. Whether or not they rise to the level of these definitions, I will leave up to you, the viewer. Take, for example, on January 5th of this year at the Board of Supervisors chambers. Previously, on December 15th, the board voted on a resolution to keep the chambers closed to the public, choosing to do virtual meetings due to evolving pandemic situation. Acting against the board's decision, Supervisors Les Baugh and Patrick Jones opened the door to the public. This decision gave validation to community members wishing to flout regulations and vent their frustrations. However, the language used by some of the people whom spoke borderline into what I and many Shasta County community members believe to be seditious and treasonous language. Listen to comments made by Timothy Fairfield of Shingletown.
Flee now while you can, because the days of your tyranny are drawing to a close, and the legitimacy of this government is waning. You have proven that there is no redress of grievances in the court because the court does not want to hear it. So when the ballot box is gone, there is only the cartridge box. You have made bullets expensive, but luckily for you, ropes are reusable.
The threats made to public officials meet the technical definition of both sedition and terrorism. The argument could also be made that the attending supervisors, Patrick Jones and Les Baugh, could be considered giving aid to individuals making threats during public comment, which would then be an act of treason. In addition to that, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment states that any elected leader whom previously has taken an oath and has given aid to those whom have engaged in insurrection or rebellion will not be eligible for any public office, civil or military. As mentioned in the weekly, Patrick Jones stated at the June 29th board meeting during public comment that he considered Nathaniel Pinkney a domestic terrorist. I sought to mention it again, as I feel it is important to state how a disparaging language from a leader can trickle down to their supporters. In a post by Melissa Magana, you can see Cottonwood militia leader Woody Clenenden repeat in a comment that Nathan is a domestic terrorist. In this second post by Melissa, she states that Nathan supports the rioters in a recent video that took place in Los Angeles, even though Nathan was not involved at all. According to the Constitution, leaders have a responsibility to a certain level of decorum. It is stated in the preamble of the Constitution to ensure domestic tranquility and to promote the general welfare, two things Patrick Jones' comments go directly against. Many sentiments shared in Shasta County appear to be driven from national events. Just one day after the January 5th Shasta County Board meeting, the insurrection at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. was alleged to be the result of seditious speech by Donald Trump and many of his supporters. To date, 545 people have been arrested and charged in the Capitol insurrection. Red, White, and Blueprint co-founder John Knight posted on social media on January 9th that he attended the January 6th Capitol protest. He asserts that there were false flag actors dressed in pro-Trump branded clothing. There currently isn't any evidence to support that assertion. One of John Knight's partners in the Red, White, and Blueprint, Carlos Zapata, is no stranger to this kind of rhetoric either.
What if we all got guns and we went to the Capitol and we said, hey, you're not doing that. There's more of us. There's more arms in the hands of American citizens than there is in the top 7 militaries of the world, okay? More arms. There's 6 million registered hunters, like avid hunters in this country. That's an arm. That's bigger than the Army, okay? You're gonna tell me that those people aren't gonna fight? You're gonna tell me that those people can't take over a state capitol somewhere and put a gun to somebody's head and say, no, you're not doing that. We're not allowing you to do that. This is our country.
These sentiments are becoming more common in Shasta County, which is likely due to the promotion of voices such as Carlos. He has been featured on InfoWars, where he's been seen speaking of the efficacy of violence in society.
We have been pushed to a point of violence. You don't vote your way out of socialism. Once it takes root, the only way to eradicate it is to fight with arms, to have a violent confrontation, to have blood in the streets. And I hate to say that, but it's the reality of where we're at. You don't fix it by talking, by rallying, by even voting. You fix that mechanism by violent overthrow.
These clips can be interpreted as seditious, as it seeks to validate the position that violence against one own's government is acceptable if it is for a righteous purpose. These clips predate the inception of the Red, White, and Blueprint, a 9-part docuseries chronicling the recall of 3 Shasta County supervisors that is currently on its 4th episode. In addition to Carlos's current legal troubles, he has a history of lashing out online when he feels slighted. The following are screenshots of threats he's made to a community member. This is a picture Carlos sent to his intended target, a photo of their driveway, and this is part of his exchange. Intimidation, again, is an example of terrorism. Jesse Lane, a recall supporter and Red, White, and Blueprint cast member, has also made troubling statements and comments. Here is a public comment he made about a News Cafe reporter, Donnie Chamberlain, where he states, quote, "It is time we remove her from our way of living," end quote, due to displeasure with her reporting. Another example of threats that meet the definition of terrorism. In another post, someone asks what happens if the recall doesn't work. Jesse replies, "Then there is always plan B." Indirectly related to the recall efforts, some community members have had their personal information leaked online. Things like their private information, phone number, or address. This is a method called doxing. I myself personally was doxed last week following comments I made in a KRCR social media post. Shasta County resident Bill Pyatt commented on a thread on a public post I had made, stating Nathaniel Pinkney should be, quote, skull stomped. He posted my phone number and street name, followed up with the fact that he could be at my residence within 10 minutes. Shortly after this exchange, he erased the post as well as blocked me. Behavior like this online is becoming more and more common and is not acceptable. If you've been doxxed, please keep screenshots and let the authorities know. Doxing is a form of intimidation designed to silence someone out of fear. It also meets the technical definition of terrorism. It is a crime according to HR 6478, the Interstate Doxing Prevention Act, which makes it a crime to knowingly publish or attempt to conspire to publish personally identifiable information. Violators are subject to criminal penalties such as a fine, a prison term up to 5 years, or both, as well as civil liability. There are actually quite a few more examples, but for the sake of time, I will just say this. Shasta County is not defined by this type of behavior. We are better than this. It is important that we keep a certain level of discourse in our republic. In addition to holding our leaders accountable, we must be held accountable as well. As the 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, said in the Gettysburg Address, "A house divided cannot stand." And that's the breakdown for the week of June 28th, 2021.